Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In this third portion of our second lecture on Descriptive Statistics and Islamic Approach, we continue our study of Malcolm Gladwell's article on college rankings. He starts by noting that there has been a dramatic and almost unimaginable change in the way that these rankings are used. Initially, it was meant for students to give them some rough idea of the quality of the college that they were going to. It was not meant to be very serious. But as time progressed and these rankings have gained massive amount of popularity, these are taken as proof of good management. There is a rivalry among colleges to rise in these rankings, and policies are made to achieve higher rankings. And all of these are both surprising and unpleasant developments. Looking at the methodology itself, the US College and News Report measures these 7 characteristics as the indicators of university quality. These are undergraduate reputation, retention rates, which means how many people stay in the college until graduation, faculty resources, how selective is the admission process, financial resources, graduation rate performance, and alumni giving. So why these factors? That's what we will think about. Malcolm Gladwell registers 2 complaints about this process. One of these is that the universities being ranked are extremely diverse, heterogeneous. So it's sort of like comparing apples and oranges. The second complaint that he registers is that each university is very complex, and so for example, one of the universities may have dozens of departments, campuses, programs. How can we take a single number and assign it to a university? And this is certainly a valid complaint. But we will see that there are other problems which Malcolm Gladwell does not bring up. In an earlier lecture, we saw that to make statistics connect with real life, we have to ask the questions of why these numbers are being measured, how they are constructed, and what is the purpose of the analysis, and how this will matter for the future. So along these lines, there are many questions which arise with this business of college rankings. So the question is, why are these 7 factors there? There are many others we could think of. Why are these weights? Some of them are 20%, some 5%. Why these? Why not others? What are these factors actually measuring? And actually, how do we calculate the factor scores? So we'll look at some of these questions. One of the simplest things is to ask if the number measures what it is supposed to measure. Malcolm Gladwell gives the example of the suicide rate. Here, the target is measurable in the sense that there is actually a correct number of people who commit suicide every year. But how can we find this out? This is very difficult because what we need to do is to guess the intentions of someone who died. And we need to know something about how he died. In some cases, when people leave suicide notes, the issue is clear, but in most cases, suicide intention is not clear, and someone else makes the judgment. It could be police officer, it could be family, doctors. A lot of different factors play a role in making the decision to declare whether a death is due to suicide or not. Most likely the actual statistics are very much different from the reality, and there is just no way to know the difference. And so even though we can look at this suicide statistics, to make any conclusion from this is really very hard and sort of meaningless. So what I would like to add, in addition to what Gladwell has to say, is that we must be very clear about what we are trying to measure, the target. There is a number, but what does this number measure? So for example, here we're trying to measure the quality of college, but what do we mean by quality. So one example of how you could make it specific, how you could make the target clear, is to say that we want to measure student learning. So student enters with a set of knowledge and skills, and these things can be evaluated, and then when he leaves he has another set of knowledge and skills, and that can also be evaluated. So the difference between these two, that would be our target. So this is definitely, and now it's much more precise than this vague word quality. But one important thing to note is that this is multidimensional. The knowledge will be gained in mathematics and in chemistry and in literature, and there will be different amounts of gain in different dimensions, and one number cannot capture all of the dimensions of the change. So this is one of the problems with quality measurement. The other problem is that often we measure instruments. I mean, instead of measuring the change, we measure things which should produce change. Like if you have good faculty, that should produce learning, but whether or not it actually does is a different question. So instead of trying to measure inputs into the process, we should try to directly measure the outcome. In the GNP measures also, the same thing has been noted by the Stiglitz and Fitoussi report, that instead of measuring how much goods are produced, we should look at what people are consuming. This is a direct measure of the target. So this kind of clarity does not exist and this is very important to learn when we are trying to use numbers to measure things. As an illustration of these issues, we look at one of the 7 items, which is called faculty resources. So why are faculty resources being measured? Well, the justification given by the US News and World Report is that student engagement is a very important part of the educational process. How much the students interact with the faculty will determine how good an education they get. And so faculty resources is supposed to be a proxy for student engagement. So how this faculty resources is measured? According to the newspaper, they say that we measure the class size. So in a smaller class, you would have more engagement. Faculty salary, high quality, higher paid faculty maybe should interact more with the students. Is this really true? We don't know. If the faculty has more PhDs, then perhaps some of this PhD rubs off onto the student. Is this really true? Again, we don't know. The student-faculty ratio, yes, if there are fewer students, faculty has a chance to engage with the students, but whether they actually use this chance or not, we don't know. Proportion of full-time faculty, yes, if we have a full-time faculty, they have an opportunity to engage with the students more than adjuncts and more than part-time. But again, is this actually done or not? So here again, all of the things we are measuring are inputs into the process. They are not the outputs. So these are the things that one needs to get student engagement. So we should try to measure the engagement itself rather than the inputs into the process. So a lot of statistics is done without any clear thinking about what you are trying to measure, why you are trying to measure it. And this is very important to change to do good statistics. So if we think about how much the students grow in the educational process, we know that they start with diverse backgrounds and they change in the process. And suppose we want to measure change. There is a research study cited in the Malcolm Gladwell paper. It's by Terenzini and Pasquarella. It is a meta-study. They look at 2,600 papers which study the educational process. And the conclusion is basically that if we look at the actual target, student growth, and we look at the inputs, the educational expenditure per student, student-faculty ratio, salaries, percentage with degrees, faculty research productivity, size of library, selectivity, all of these things that are being measured, there is no relationship. So this is really surprising but important results. So the use of inputs to measure the quality of education is just meaningless. It has no validity at all. So if these things don't matter, then what does matter? Well, it turns out that uh, if you want to measure teachers, then you find out that teachers who have a strong purpose, they include the students in the educational process, and they make the students feel powerful, and they are ethical, and they think about the process of education, giving assignments and keeping things orderly, and making the students do tasks and assessing and evaluating. These are the students who do the best. And these are not the qualities, none of them are being measured by the things that we have been discussing so far. As another example of the same thing, not covered by Malcolm Gladwell, we look at a question of, do SAT scores predict academic success? So we all across the USA, SAT scores are used to do college entrance. So those with high scores get in, and those with low don't. So do the SAT scores actually have any significant correlation with student performance? Well, the facts are quite clear, although there's a huge controversy. The SAT is correlated with first year performance, but this correlation becomes weaker with time as you go to second year, third year. So basically, long run performance does not have any correlation with SAT. But even the first year performance is not very strong, in the sense that although higher SAT scores do lead to higher GPA, that the impact is very small. There's only about a tenth of a percentage point in rise in GPA, corresponding to a 100-point increase in SAT. So it is, on the basis of this, one would say that it is useless to use the SAT as the criteria for admission. What are the characteristics which strongly correlate with success? Well, basically, again, these are soft, unmeasurable characteristics. It's how much drive, how much motivation the student has, and how much perseverance. If he faces difficulty, does he run away, or does he buckle down and work hard to solve the problem? These are the two characteristics which have very strong success correlation. So another way to ask the question is, can we take students who have very low SAT scores and turn them into brilliant performance? The answer is yes. This has been done many times, and it can be proven that basically you can motivate students and you can inspire them. And if you do, then any student has potential which we cannot discover until the students are challenged. So the trying to measure things which are not really measurable blinds us to the real issues. So in conclusion, we must look at the bigger picture. And basically, the bigger picture is that in the early 20th century, the rise of this philosophy of logical positivism led to the drive to measure everything. Actually, this is bigger than the positivism. It's just a convenient name, but this is one of the changes which took place in the theory of knowledge. What knowledge is was redefined to mean knowledge is that of the observable, and that which can be measured, and that which can be calculated. But the truth is that the most important things in our lives are not measurable. Now, even if you take things which are measurable, the measures are often on different dimensions, like skills in math and in English and other skills. Even if we can measure them, these are multidimensional, and you cannot use one number to summarize 5 numbers or 10 numbers or more numbers. So the idea that of reducing everything to a single number is ridiculous, and it causes a lot of harm. So when the basic harm is caused by thinking that something can be measured by a number. The idea that we can assign a number to a college that measures the performance. This is the real source of all difficulty. And the change can be that we need to make is to think clearly about what we are trying to do, the purpose of the study, what will the use of our statistics be. All of these issues which are not part of standard statistics are essentially important in doing statistics well.